Trump said, very possible we make a deal. Also said bombing starts if not. IRGC said new procedures. On Wednesday morning, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social 2 paragraphs, same post. Read them both. First paragraph. Assuming Iran agrees to give what has been agreed to, which is perhaps a big assumption, the already legendary epic fury will be at an end and the highly effective blockade will allow the Hormuz Strait to be open to all, including Iran. Second paragraph. If they don't agree, the bombing starts, and it will be, sadly, at a much higher level and intensity than it was before. Very possible we make a deal. Bombing starts if not. Same morning, same person, same post. And then, separately, Iran's IRGC Navy posted on X. With the end of the aggressors' threats and in light of new procedures, safe and sustainable transit through the strait will be facilitated. It did not specify what the new procedures were. It thanked owners and captains of ships for respecting Iranian regulations when moving through the strait. New procedures. No details. Safe transit facilitated. Same morning. Trump said, deal possible or bombing. IRGC said new procedures for safe passage. Iran's foreign ministry said Tehran is reviewing the U.S. proposal and will convey its response to Pakistan on Thursday, and a CMA CGM container ship, the San Antonio, was struck in the Strait of Hormuz on Tuesday, with crew members injured and the vessel damaged. Deal possible. Bombing starts. New procedures. Ship struck. I want to spend today unpacking exactly what each of those 4 things means and why they are all happening simultaneously on the same Wednesday morning, 67 days into a war that everyone is saying is close to ending. Let me start with Trump's post, because the 2 paragraphs need to be read as a single strategic communication, not as contradictory impulses. Trump is not being incoherent. He is doing something specific. He is simultaneously sending a message to Iran about what success looks like. Hormuz open to all, epic fury over, blockade lifted, and sending a message to Iran about what failure looks like. Bombing starts at a much higher level and intensity than before. Both messages are aimed at the same audience. Both messages are designed to narrow Iran's decision space. If you agree, this ends and you get relief. If you don't agree, you get a bigger version of what you already survived. The specific framing of much higher level and intensity is worth analyzing. Trump is not saying he will resume the same bombing campaign. He is saying the next one will be worse. He is describing an escalation beyond what happened on February 28th in Operation Midnight Hammer. What would much higher level and intensity look like? Midnight Hammer struck nuclear facilities at Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan. Higher intensity could mean striking oil infrastructure at Karg Island, attacking the IRGC's command and control nodes, targeting the regime's military leadership directly. Trump is describing a threat that would be qualitatively different from the first campaign, not just quantitatively larger. And he is doing this while simultaneously saying, very possible we'll make a deal, to reporters on Wednesday morning. He told reporters the talks have been great, and a deal is very possible. He said the U.S. has had very good talks over the past 24 hours. This is Trump's negotiating method in its pure form. The carrot is explicit. Here is exactly what you get if you agree. The stick is explicit. Here is exactly what happens if you don't. Both are public. Both are real. The decision Iran is being asked to make is completely clear. Agree to the terms already discussed, or face escalation at a level you have not yet experienced. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghaei said on Wednesday that Tehran is reviewing the U.S. proposal and will convey its response to Pakistan after finalizing its views. He said negotiations are focused on ending the war, not the nuclear issue, which would come at a later stage. ISNA, the Iranian students' news agency cited by Iran's foreign ministry, dismissed reports of a memorandum of understanding as media speculation. 3 things in that statement. First, Iran confirmed it is reviewing a U.S. proposal, a specific document with specific terms. Second, Iran confirmed the nuclear issue is not the current subject of negotiation. The current subject is ending the war, meaning Hormuz, ceasefire terms, the blockade. Third, Iran dismissed MOU reports as media speculation, either to manage expectations about the speed of finalization or to preserve flexibility in the final terms. The ISNA dismissal of MOU reports is the most interesting element. Multiple media outlets had reported that the 2 sides were close to a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, as a first step toward a comprehensive agreement. An MOU is a preliminary document that establishes the framework for a deal without constituting a legally binding agreement. It describes what each side will do in the first phase and what the subsequent negotiations will cover. Iran saying this is media speculation could mean several things. It could mean there is no MOU and the reports were wrong. It could mean there is something similar to an MOU, but Iran does not want to call it that because the term implies American narrative framing. It could mean an MOU was drafted, but Iran has not agreed to it. The dismissal is not a confirmation that no document exists. It is a specific framing of Iran's relationship to American media reports about the content of private negotiations. Now let me explain the IRGC's new procedures statement. Because safe and sustainable transit will be facilitated under new procedures is the most carefully worded sentence produced by any Iranian institution this week. The IRGC Navy did not say Hormuz is open. It did not say Iran's toll system has ended. It did not say Iran no longer has the authority to regulate passage through the strait. It said safe transit will be facilitated under new procedures. And it did not say what the new procedures are. That is a specific choice. The procedures are new, meaning they are different from the procedures that have been in place since February 28th. But what they are is unstated. This could mean several things in practice. New procedures could mean Iran has revised its toll and permit system to create a mechanism that appears more like a legitimate international governance arrangement than a unilateral Iranian seizure operation. The Larak Island corridor that Iran established in early April and where IRGC escort vessels accompanied ships paying a $2 million per ship fee was the first version of Iran's Hormuz governance mechanism. It was ad hoc, coercive, and unilaterally imposed. If the new procedures involve something more formalized, a pre-registration system with known fees, a liaison office at a neutral port, a maritime coordination center involving Oman, then Iran has changed the form of its Hormuz control while preserving the substance of its authority. New procedures could mean Iran has quietly dropped the specific behaviors, the seizures of vessels, the cruise missile attacks on non-approved ships, the IRGC gunboat interceptions that were causing the most acute international disruption, while maintaining its underlying legal position that the strait is subject to Iranian sovereign governance. New procedures could mean Iran has received enough of a signal from the U.S. reply to its 14-point proposal that it is de-escalating its most aggressive strait behaviors in anticipation of a deal, without formally committing to anything in writing that would constrain its negotiating position. The new procedures are Iran's way of creating conditions on the ground that make the deal announcement look like a confirmation of existing reality rather than a concession. What new procedures almost certainly does not mean is that Iran has abandoned its claim of sovereign governance over the strait. The IRGC thanked ship owners and captains for respecting Iranian regulations when moving through the strait. That exact phrase is crucial, not respecting international maritime law, not complying with UNCLOS, respecting Iranian regulations. The new procedures are procedures within Iran's claimed regulatory authority over the waterway. That framing is carefully preserved even as the specific implementation changes. This is precisely the face-saving architecture that CNN's Robertson described on Tuesday. The procedures are Iranian. The transit is facilitated. Trump can say Hormuz is open to all. Iran can say Iranian regulations govern passage. Both descriptions point at the same physical reality from opposite narrative directions. Now let me talk about the CMA CGM San Antonio, because a French container ship being struck with crew members injured while Trump is saying deal possible is the most direct evidence that the corridor is not yet functioning the way the diplomatic narrative implies. CMA CGM is the world's third largest container shipping line. Its vessel, the San Antonio, was struck on Tuesday during the operational window around Project Freedom's pause. The French shipping group confirmed Wednesday that crew members were injured and the vessel was damaged. The injured crew had been evacuated and given medical care. CMA CGM is well known to Iran's maritime operations. It was CMA CGM's vessel, the Kribi, that was one of the first ships to successfully transit the Hormuz corridor at the start of April under Iranian escort before the formal ceasefire. That transit was one of the first confirmed instances of Iran's toll system functioning in practice. The French government spokesperson Maud Breguin said France was in no way the target. The exact wording that means France acknowledges the strike happened, but is carefully not attributing it to Iran and not escalating France's diplomatic posture. France does not want to be drawn into a confrontation with Iran during what appears to be the final approach to a deal. But France also cannot ignore that its third largest shipping line had a vessel struck with crew injured. For shipping companies watching this, the San Antonio strike is the most direct answer to whether the strait is safe under whatever procedures are now in place. 1,600 ships are still stranded in the strait, according to CNN's reporting. 20,000 seafarers are stuck. Shipping companies are watching every incident. The San Antonio strike Tuesday, followed by the IRGC's new procedures announcement Wednesday, creates a specific interpretive challenge for those companies. The procedures were announced after the strike that they were apparently designed to prevent, which means the new procedures have not yet been tested against any transit attempt. And the 1,600 stranded ships are not a footnote. Each of those vessels represents cargo, food, medicine, electronics, petrochemicals, industrial equipment that was bound for somewhere and is not arriving. Each day those ships sit in the strait is a day of global supply chain disruption that compounds the existing inflation from the oil price. The new procedures, if they work, begin to resolve this. If they do not work, if ships attempt transit under the new procedures and are struck, the 1,600 remain stranded and the supply disruption continues regardless of what any diplomat says on any given Wednesday morning. Now let me add the Ghalibaf element, because Iran's parliament speaker released an audio message on Wednesday that tells you something specific about the domestic Iranian context in which Thursday's reply is being prepared. Ghalibaf's audio message focused on belt tightening. He called on Iranians to practice thriftiness. He said the U.S. intends to break Iran through economic pressure. And then he used a phrase that became the most quoted Iranian statement of Wednesday in English language media. He called frugality a missile that people can fire into the heart of the enemy. Frugality as a missile. That is Ghalibaf telling the Iranian public that their economic sacrifice, the 67% inflation, the 2 million unemployed, the internet blackout that has lasted 67 days, the gas shortages and supply disruptions, is a weapon, not just a burden they must endure. An active instrument of war that they are firing at America. He called all intellectuals and specialists to approach the government with ideas to solve the problems arising from the war. Why does this matter for Thursday's reply? Because it tells you something about the domestic political management of whatever Iran is about to agree to. If Iran signs an agreement that ends the blockade and lifts the economic pressure, Ghalibaf's frugality speech provides the retrospective framing. Iran fought back with its people's sacrifice. America was unable to break that resistance, and the deal Iran is accepting is from a position of strength, not weakness. The frugality speech is not just economic advice, it is the narrative infrastructure for accepting the deal. A leadership that is preparing its public for defeat does not call frugality a missile, it calls it endurance. Ghalibaf, calling it a missile, is saying, what you did, suffering through this, was an offensive act. You fired missiles at America's economy. And now we are considering what to accept from a position where our missiles landed. That is the domestic frame Iran is building for Thursday's reply, whatever that reply contains. Pope Leo XIV, the first American-born pope in history, elected just weeks ago, called on Trump from Rome to end the war. He has been explicit in his opposition to the conflict. Trump, responding to reporters, said the Pope is endangering a lot of Catholics. He said he disagrees with the Pope's position. He said it would be terrible if the Pope's words helped Iran. A newly elected American Pope publicly opposing an American war and being dismissed by the American president as endangering Catholics is not a small diplomatic story. The Pope has relationships with Catholic communities across the Gulf states, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and across the developing world. When the Pope calls for peace, it lands differently in those communities than a European head of state's statement. And for the 47% of the world's countries that are predominantly Catholic, the Pope's public opposition to the Iran war is a signal about how the global Catholic community is reading the conflict's moral dimension. Trump dismissing the Pope's concerns and describing the Pope's position as endangering Catholics is Trump communicating to his domestic evangelical base rather than to the global diplomatic audience. It is a signal that Trump will not modify his negotiating position based on religious authority. But it also tells you something about the range of institutions that are now calling for this war to end. 61% of Americans, Germany's Chancellor, the UN Secretary General, the Pope. That is a broad coalition of moral and political authority aligned against continuation. Now, let me steelman the bombing threat, because Trump's much higher level and intensity is not empty bluster, and treating it as such would be analytically wrong. CENTCOM has prepared options for resumed bombing at higher intensity. Axios reported the existence of a short and powerful strike option. The options reportedly include strikes on oil infrastructure at Karg Island, on IRGC command and control facilities, and on regime leadership targets that were specifically excluded from Operation Midnight Hammer on February 28th. The carrier strike groups are still in the region. The munition stores have been partially replenished. The targeting packages exist, and Trump is right that something specific has already been agreed in his framing. He said, assuming Iran agrees to give what has been agreed to. Note the phrase, what has been agreed to. This implies that elements of a deal have been agreed at the working level between negotiating teams, but have not yet received formal authorization from Iran's leadership through the supreme leader's motorcycle courier chain. Trump is describing a gap between working-level agreement and political ratification. A deal that is agreed among diplomats but has not yet been approved by the Supreme Leader's office is exactly what Pakistan's getting close to finalizing and Iran's finalizing its views both describe. The working text is close. The ratification is pending. Trump's bombing threat in this context is aimed at the ratification gap. He is telling the Supreme Leader the diplomats have agreed to something. The question is whether you ratify it. And if you don't, the bombing starts at a level you have not experienced. Here is where the steelman collapses. The much higher level and intensity threat has a timing problem that Trump's own post creates. He says, very possible we'll make a deal, in the same breath as bombing starts if not. He says, very good talks over the past 24 hours. He is describing active diplomatic progress while simultaneously threatening escalation. A threat of escalation during active diplomatic progress is credible only if Iran believes Trump would actually execute it while negotiations are at their most advanced stage. And Iran's foreign ministry is calmly saying they are reviewing the proposal and will respond Thursday. They are not panicking, they are processing. The bombing threat will become real if Thursday's reply is a rejection. Until then, it is a negotiating statement, not an operational order. Iran's leadership understands this distinction. Pakistan's mediators understand it. The markets understand it. Brent did not spike significantly on the bombing threat Wednesday morning. The expectation is that Thursday's reply is a yes, or at least a conditional yes, not a rejection that would trigger the threat's execution. Watch Thursday's reply carefully. Not just whether Iran says yes or no. Watch the specific terms Iran accepts or modifies. If Iran accepts nuclear talks in a later phase but agrees to Hormuz opening and blockade lifting in the first phase, that is a deal. If Iran insists on nuclear sequencing in phase 3, but proposes Hormuz governance in phase 2 under conditions that Trump can describe as open to all, that is a deal. If Iran insists on reparations as a precondition, that is not yet a deal. Watch whether the new procedures produce actual ship movements Thursday without incident. If CMA CGM or Maersk announces a vessel transiting under the new procedures without being struck, the IRGC's announcement has operational meaning. If vessels attempt transit and are turned back or struck, the new procedures are symbolic rather than operational. Watch whether Trump says anything about the Thursday reply before Iran has transmitted it. If he posts on Truth Social Thursday morning with a great news framing before Pakistan has formally received Iran's reply, it means the working level agreement has already been transmitted through back channels and the formal document is a formality. Trump said very possible we make a deal, also said bombing starts if not. IRGC said new procedures, Iran replies Thursday. The Pope called for peace, and Trump said the Pope is endangering Catholics. A French ship was struck. 1,600 vessels are still stranded in the Strait. Thursday is the answer to all of it. Wednesday is the setup for the answer. If you found this useful, push back on it in the comments. I will see you in the next one. And here is the one piece of the Wednesday picture that I want to close with, because it is the most absurd and the most real simultaneously. 1,600 ships are stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. Companies are unwilling to bear the risk of transit. Trump's Project Freedom lasted 48 hours and guided 2 ships through. Pakistan's prime minister said the pause will go a long way toward peace. The IRGC said new procedures. The San Antonio crew are in medical care. Iran is reviewing a proposal. Thursday is when Iran replies. And Ghalibaf recorded an audio message asking Iranians to practice frugality, calling it a missile they can fire into the heart of the enemy. 1,600 ships sitting idle in the world's most important oil shipping lane. 2 paragraphs on Truth Social. Deal possible. Bombing starts. An audio message from Iran's parliament speaker calling household savings a weapon. A French container ship with injured crew being cared for somewhere in the Gulf. A newly elected American pope opposed by the American president. This is day 67. The carrot is on the table. The stick is visible. The new procedures are unspecified. Thursday's reply will tell you which of those the decision makers in Tehran chose to respond to. If you found this useful, push back on it in the comments. I will see you in the next one. One more detail that is buried in Wednesday's reporting and deserves to be surfaced. The U.S. military disabled an Iranian-flagged tanker in the Gulf of Oman when it attempted to sail toward an Iranian port. CNN confirmed this. The blockade is still running. Trump paused Project Freedom. But the blockade, the naval interdiction of Iranian port vessels, continues. And a specific Iranian tanker was disabled Wednesday while Iran was reviewing a U.S. proposal and preparing its Thursday reply. The IRGC's new procedures statement said safe passage will be facilitated with the end of the aggressors' threats. The threats have not ended. A tanker was disabled on Wednesday. The blockade continues. The threats, in Iran's framing, are still ongoing, which means the new procedures are being offered under conditions that Iran's own statement says must end before those procedures apply. This is the gap between the diplomatic narrative and the operational reality. Diplomatically, deal possible, new procedures, Thursday reply, great talks. Operationally, tanker disabled, 1,600 ships stranded, San Antonio crew in medical care, blockade running. Both are true. And Thursday's reply will be shaped by which set of facts Iran's decision-makers decide is more important to respond to. Trump said, very possible we make a deal. The IRGC said new procedures. Iran replies, Thursday. A tanker was disabled the same day. Watch Thursday.